Hey, what's going on everybody? Today I'm going to show you how to set up an Edgerouter on a network that already has an existing router or modem router combo. Now this is going to be very similar to my double NAT video that I put out a few weeks ago, but basically when you use an Edgerouter with an existing router already in the network, you're going to be battling a double NAT by default. However, the goal of this video is to understand what's actually happening with the multiple routers and how to best set it up so that these types of issues don't really affect you very much. Now, as always, we're going to go into some dry theory explanation first, and this one is going to revolve around routing in general. Now, I know you didn't really come here or click on this video to learn theory, but to understand what we're going to be doing, we need to take a look at why we're even going to be doing it. So I'm going to try and keep this topic about routing simple. Basically, there's two rules that we need to be concerned about when it comes to routers. Number one, we cannot have two different networks on two different interfaces of the same router. So for simplicity, no different networks on different interfaces. Now in our case, what this means is our local network and our internet network. They can't be on the same subnet. Technically, we can have the same network on multiple interfaces because most home routers have some sort of switch built in, and this rule does not apply to switches. Basically, our internet and our local area network can't use the same subnet. So the 192.168.1. whatever cannot also be the network used on the internet side of our router, and I realize that got cut off. That is my bad. Now, the second rule we need to worry about with routing is we must have a route to all networks. Now, this isn't really a hard rule, as in the router is not going to stop functioning if this isn't true, but it won't really do much good if this isn't true. And all this means is that your router should have a game plan for every destination network. A route is just what do we do with traffic destined for what network. For example, if we're trying to go to 2.2.2.2, then the router needs to have a route in the table which matches this destination. Now, typically home routers only have 3 routes in their routing table. I know that looks like an E, but that's actually a tree. But those 3 routes are one for the local area network, think 192.168.1.0, one for the actual internet link, think whatever your public IP subnet is. In this example, we'll just say 1.0.0.0, and it's a /30, and a default route, which is just a catch-all for any other destination. So with these 3 routes, you effectively have a route to any destination network. If it's going here, it's got a route to it on the LAN. If it's going here, it's got a route to it between your router and your ISP's gateway. And if it's going absolutely anywhere at all else, it's going to use your default route, which is just going to also point to your ISP's default gateway. And basically what that's doing is just like, I don't know where to send this traffic. I just know that this next router has way more routes than I do. Hopefully they can resolve it to the right destination. So with these 2 rules in mind and this quick and dirty on routing tables, let's just take a look at what happens when we add an Edgerouter to the mix. Now I'm just going to draw out a quick network diagram, and for this I'm going to assume a few things. Number one, I'm going to assume that the modem is actually a modem router combo. Now it doesn't have to be, but if you do have separate devices between modem and router, then your best course of action is just going to be to plug your Edgerouter directly into the modem. Now I'm just assuming that that is not an option here because that would be the best case. Now the second thing I'm assuming is that this modem router is connected via coax or something other than Ethernet to the internet. So in this example, I'm basically using a cable connection. Now I'm also going to assume just an example internet subnet. So we're just going to use 173.0.0.0 as our internet subnet between our modem router and the ISP gateway. We're just going to say that the ISP has the .1 address and we're going to have the .2. And the last thing I'm going to assume is that our LAN is using the default of almost all LANs of 192.168.1.0/24. Now, let's say that we're adding our Edgerouter straight into here. So, boom, we connect our Edgerouter to our existing modem router combo. And for the Edgerouter, I'm also going to assume that we've already gone through the first time setup wizard and we really didn't change anything settings-wise, but it's ready to go as a router. And if we left everything default, the Edgerouter is going to be running DHCP. It's going to be getting its IP address via DHCP also on the WAN interface. And our Edgerouter's IP is also going to be 192.168.1.1 on the LAN side, because that is typically what it would be set to as default if we didn't change any of those optional values during setup. Now, you can probably spot a problem here. Our Edgerouter is going to violate rule number 1 since it would have both its LAN and its WAN interfaces on the same subnet. Now what this means is that we're going to need to change one of these subnets. It really doesn't matter which one is changed, but it's most likely easier just to modify the Edgerouter subnet because that's the newest device. So we're just going to change the Edgerouter's subnet to 192.168.2.1. Now we have satisfied rule number 1. Our two networks are different. And since it's in the default setup, we know that we already have a route to all other networks since DHCP would have handed the Edgerouter a gateway. So we'll just say that our Edgerouter got 192.168.1.3. And when it gets this address via DHCP, it already has a DHCP option pointing it to .1 as its default gateway. Now, because our Edgerouter is in its default configuration, it's also going to be running NAT. And here's where that kind of double NAT situation comes into play. Any traffic from the Edgerouter is going to be coming from a source IP of 192.168.1.3. Now, all of this is well and good, and anything that you connect to your Edgerouter is going to be able to access the internet through your existing modem router combo. Because whatever device it is going to communicate through the Edgerouter. It's going to perform NAT, it's going to send that up and out to the internet, and the communication is going to come back just fine because both of those routers are keeping a NAT translation table. And I did cover this in my double NAT video, but really to get around this, we need to place our existing modem router combo into either bridge, pass-through, or DMZ hosting mode. And there's some differences between these, but we're going to be using DMZ mode since that's really all my current modem supports, and that's what I can show you. Basically what this does is it puts a port forward on all traffic coming in, and it just forwards all of it on to whatever IP we designate. And I already went through kind of how to enable that in my double NAT video, so I'm not going to go back into that now. But we're basically ready to go, and we're using the Edgerouter alongside our main router. Now we're still doing NAT up here, but it doesn't matter because all of that traffic is being forwarded on anyways due to our DMZ hosting mode. Now I'll gloss over the other two. Basically, pass-through and bridge mode are two modes where your Edgerouter would actually get the public IP. It wouldn't have a private one anymore. In bridge mode, basically your modem router combo becomes a modem only, and in pass-through mode, it just simply passes the public IP through to that device. So one of those two modes are actually preferable to the DMZ mode, but sometimes that's all you got. You got to work with what you got. So this is all good the way we have it set up right now. We can hook up any more like switches, access points, desktops, whatever. And all of these devices are going to use the Edgerouter as their primary router, and they'll be able to communicate with everything just fine. But what if we still want to use our main router as well, and we don't want the Edgerouter to actually be the primary device? Well, the good news is you can actually still use the existing router for things like, say, Wi-Fi, for example. Let's say you don't have a secondary access point available, or you don't want to pay the money to buy one, because especially Unify access points, they're a little bit expensive. So if you've already got wireless capability on your main router, you may want to reuse it. But the bad news is that our wireless devices are not going to be able to talk directly with our Edgerouter devices, at least in the current configuration. And this is because of that rule of every router has to have a route to every other network, as well as the fact that our Edgerouter is performing NAT. And just to kind of visualize, say we got the phone connected to our existing wireless router, it's going to get its address, DHCP 192.168.1. whatever, we'll say .4. It'll be able to communicate with the internet just fine, but if it wants to get, say, to our desktop over here, 192.168.2.5, it's not going to be able to, because while our Edgerouter has a route to pretty much every other network, our existing modem router does not know about the existence of this network. So all the traffic from the phone, if you try to browse directly to 192.168.2. whatever, it's going to send it out its default route, because going down the line, it's got a route for its internet network, its LAN network, and anything it doesn't know is automatically going to the internet, and 192.168.2 would fall under that rule. Now, to get around this, we have a few different options. We can create a static route on the existing router pointing to our Edgerouter's IP of .3 as its next hop. Now, personally, my modem router combo supports adding static routes, so let's just go ahead and take a look at what that would look like. So here on my personal modem at home, if we go into advanced, over to the left, IP addressing, oh, not IP addressing, static routing, then here's where we can define our static route. So destination IP would be 192.168.2.0. We have to define the subnet mask, so that would be 255.255.255.0/24 network. And then the gateway would be the IP of the Edgerouter, which would be 1.3 in our example. And then we would just hit apply, and now our existing modem router combo has a route to the network behind our Edgerouter. But we have another hurdle, which is that our Edgerouter is running NAT. So while the traffic is going to now get forwarded down to our Edgerouter instead of out to the internet, the Edgerouter is just going to drop it since the connection's coming from the outside. It still thinks of this network as the internet, and it's untrusted. So what we would need to do on the Edgerouter is now start port forwarding certain ports to certain devices if we want to be able to talk between these two different networks. And then this creates yet another issue, and that's that we can only browse to a specific service per machine. So this starts to get really messy. Now, to avoid this entirely, all we really need to do is disable NAT on our Edgerouter, because we're basically just going to turn our Edgerouter into a vanilla router. It's no longer a gateway, so it doesn't really need to think of this network as untrusted and this network as trusted. So in addition to getting rid of that NAT rule, we're also going to have to basically get rid of all the firewall rules, because they don't matter at this point. And back in our Edgerouter, the way we would do this is just simply go to our firewall policies and pretty much just edit all the rule sets and change it to an interface of nothing and then save it. Or you could also go into each individual rule and uncheck enable, but I'm not going to do that. I don't want to do that on my router. To get rid of NAT, that is under the NAT tab. You can see by default on our Edgerouter we have this one rule, and that's masquerade for WAN. Basically, we just delete that, and it will stop translating all of our internal addresses to our external address. So back on our diagram here, instead of everything coming from 192.168.1.3 going out, now you're actually going to get the real source IP of 2. Whatever, say 2.4, 2.3, and 2.5. So that packet is going to have that as a source IP address on everything now instead of the .3. And this is also not a problem anymore, since we already have a static route for 192.168.2.0 pointing down to our Edgerouter. So our existing router actually knows what to do with this traffic. And now at this point, we should be able to browse to any device on the Edgerouter by IP address from the existing wireless network. Basically, all we were trying to do with this setup was to be able to browse from this network to this network directly. And now that I've shown you these two options, let me tell you the downsides to doing it this way and why you probably shouldn't. Now, since we have the Edgerouter basically just wide open, and we have the static route on our modem router combo, we're still using the existing modem router combo as the primary router. Now, the Edgerouter isn't really contributing anything useful to this situation besides just housing additional devices down here. And if you're wondering, why can't I just use a regular switch instead of the Edgerouter? Well, you would be 100% correct. It would be way easier just to use a switch, because effectively what we did was turned our Edgerouter almost into a switch, except for it's routing between two different networks. And for the purpose we're trying to make it serve, this is not really ideal, especially since we probably want to use our Edgerouter as the primary router for our entire network. And at this point, we've just converted it into a switch. So while you can get it working this way, and that's real fun to play with routing and actually see that come together in the real world, I would not do it at all. So we have yet another option, and this involves kind of a creative way to use the existing router's wireless while still using the Edgerouter as pretty much the primary device for everything. Now, we have this drawn out again. We're assuming we didn't make any of those changes before. And what we're going to do this time is we're going to pass traffic from the Edgerouter back to our existing router to use the wireless radio, but all of that's going to get its DHCP information and it's going to communicate through the Edgerouter. Now, to do this, make sure you didn't create that static route that we talked about previously. And you also want to make sure that we have a static IP address on both the Edgerouter and our existing modem router. So basically we would need to log in, set this as static, and also set this as static on the Edgerouter, just for the sake of if it ever changes, not messing things up. And after we've done these things, then we can plug in, say, ETH1 from the Edgerouter back into another interface on the existing modem router. Now, if this is confusing, you're right, but I'll show you how the rules work on this. Basically, this connection here is going to be coming from our Edgerouter on like Ethernet 1 just to say Ethernet 2 on our existing one. And it really doesn't matter what interface it's on as long as it's not the internet interface. So our existing modem router combo, it has an internet interface and probably like 4 LAN interfaces that we can use, one of them being connected to the Edgerouter. And then again, our Edgerouter, Ethernet 0 is probably our WAN interface, and then we have all of our others set for LAN. And I forget if I mentioned it, but we need DHCP disabled on our modem router combo in order to use the Edgerouter as our DHCP server. And once that's disabled, when we connect from our wireless device to our main router, our DHCP request is going to go out all of the LAN ports looking for a DHCP server. So it's going to go out the LAN port that is connected to our Edgerouter that we just connected, which is going to hit the LAN interface of the Edgerouter and get a DHCP address kicked back since our Edgerouter is running DHCP now. And then our device is going to have the Edgerouter as its default gateway, as well as an IP address on the Edgerouter's LAN. And I just rewrote those for simplicity's sake. So now let's take a look at the traffic flow from this wireless device. It's going to go to our wireless router, and it's going to flow out the LAN ports of our wireless router, which is going to kick it back down to our Edgerouter on Ethernet 1. And since that's destined for the internet, it's going to forward it out ETH0, which is going to kick it right back up to our existing modem router combo. However, this is technically now a different network. It's the 192.168.0 or 1.0 network, and then it's going to go out to the internet. And then return traffic is going to come back in to our existing modem router. We've got a DMZ zone set up, so that just automatically gets port forwarded down to the Edgerouter's WAN interface. And it has a NAT table set up for that device that already requested the traffic, so it's going to kick that back up to this device on the LAN port and out the wireless radio to our phone. Completely just the simplest thing ever, right? Yeah, not really, not at all. But this is how we get the benefits of the Edgerouter while still using the wireless capabilities of an existing all-in-one. And I've actually done this in a few places. Now, obviously, it's not optimal because you are passing traffic back and forth from the same device, but they're on different networks. The best way to do that is actually just to get an AP. But if you're working with what you got and you want to reuse that wireless capability, you can just connect up the LAN port into your wireless router and it'll broadcast whatever network it's on. So this was a pretty winded explanation on the myriad of ways that you can connect an Edgerouter to your existing network. While there's many ways to do this, just know that the best way is always to have your Edgerouter just be the only device on your network as far as routers go. If possible, use a standalone modem and then just have the Edgerouter as your primary device connected up to that. But this isn't always feasible since some ISPs require that you use their equipment. For example, fiber connections. Usually your ONT is built into the ISP's device and you're not able to get a standalone modem. That is actually my case. but there are various other reasons why you might be stuck trying to deal with an edge router alongside an existing router. But just remember the rules of routing and how traffic flows through the network, and you can have routers on routers on routers if you really wanted to. You could theoretically just have multiple edge routers all over the place, or even different brands of routers, and it'll work just fine if all of the rules, those 2 rules I talked about in the beginning of this video, are satisfied. But really the question is just why? Why would you do that? But that's not really the question we wanted to answer in this video. Just wanted to show you that you can do it. So hopefully it answered some of your questions on how to use an edge router with existing routers, and hopefully I didn't cause too much confusion. I went pretty deep on creative ways that you can tie in to an existing network. And again, I'm not saying that you should do these methods. I'm just saying that it's possible. So as always, if there's questions, and I'm sure there's a lot on this one, leave them down in the comments, and happy networking.